This is one of these places you have to see it to believe it.
For one thing, from day one, even before we walked in the building, I knew we would make this happen. I knew it would happen. I knew that it would be great.
The thing that I remember was just like being a millionaire and stepping into something really, really extra wonderful.
The building was a place of dreams when it was opened in March of 1927.
For the grand opening, they had live peacocks wandering around in the lobby. And again, the idea was that, you know, for 60 cents you could feel like you were a millionaire, that you could go into these fantasy spaces and really feel like you were in this grand palace.
This was going to be the most stupendous, most fantastic, the greatest thing that had ever been built, the greatest movie theater on the face of the earth. It had everything you could possibly imagine. I think this is a classic example of what architecture is. This building goes clear back to 1927. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people have come here to see movies. Some of the greatest performers of the 20th century have come here. A lot of the great vaudeville actors, big bands of innumerable big bands have been through here.
Everything inside just seemed perfect to me. And there would be a lot of flowers around, and I think this sounds rather ridiculous, but I think it was one of the first ones that had like a sky and clouds and things going on. And those were the happy memories, plus to get in like 25 or 35 cents was a happy memory too.
The most beautiful memory that I have, and when I think about the theater and whatever name it carried, it was the twinkling stars in the ceiling. I was always awed by those stars and how they could twinkle. And to me, it was a real heaven, a beautiful sky. And one of the other marvelous things is we had no air conditioning, so I spent a lot of time in that theater just getting cool too.
Whimsical is the way we kept describing it, and also a piece of fantasy. Really, that's what it's all about. There is no purity about a certain architectural period that it was trying to capture or anything like that. You see everything from Egyptian motifs to the predominant Moorish motifs, you know, neoclassical parts and pieces of this building, but there's nothing pure about it.
My father happened to be one of many African Americans who don't necessarily appear so. And my mother was obviously an African American, so they decided to go to the movies at the Paramount. And when they got down there, they let the rope down to let my father go in and sit on the lower floor and told my mother to go upstairs. Well, it's always been rather amusing to our family because my mother said, "You better get on over here. Where do you think you're going?" But apparently he was not black.
We rode the streetcar till 16th and Farnham, and then got off and walked up the hill to 20th. And so excited to get up there.
Oh, yeah, we're going to the Paramount, you know, you almost felt like shouting it, you know, and then all of a sudden there was the Paramount in front of you, and that's where we were going. And it was one great big thrill. And then after our friends at school knew that we had been to the Paramount, we were kind of celebrities.
Yes, we were.
Because I don't think anybody else in our class had been to the Paramount at that time.
Well, it wouldn't cost over a quarter or 50 cents to go, and then popcorn and pop was only a nickel or a dime at that time, so it was affordable. But if you walked, that's an extra dime there, you wouldn't have to pay the bus man, and so walking was very easy at that time, because when you're young, you've got plenty of energy.
I remember the little usherettes, too. They were so cute, and they had their little flashlight, and they would take us down to the seat.
We got dressed up to go. The girls got dressed up, And then depending on your date, you were either super dressed up or just maybe just cleaned up for the night.
So this is a building that's about, I think that's about memories. It's a building that was about love affairs. It was a building about coming and enjoying music, coming and enjoying some of the great films of our society. And those memories, for many, many people, are embodied in this building. Now, just 2 years after the Riviera was opened, it was renamed the Paramount when the Paramount chain took over the theater. And that was the same name that it kept until it closed in 1951. It was built on land that was originally deeded to Creighton University in 1904 by John Creighton. And the school had leased the land for 99 years to the original owner of the theater, which is the A.H. Blank Theater Company of Iowa. So that when Paramount closed the building in 1951, it then had to relinquish that original lease back to Creighton University. So Creighton University suddenly found itself owning a movie theater that it didn't quite know what to do with. So in 1961, the building became the home of the Packers, Omaha's ill-fated professional bowling team.
Of course, what they quickly discovered is it's actually very boring to watch guys bowl, so that didn't last too long.
Then in the 1960s, the theater was reopened as the Astro Theater.
When the Dubinsky brothers, who were major film exhibitors in the Midwest, primarily in Nebraska and Iowa, in order to compete with the newly built Indian Hills Cinerama, bought the Paramount Theater and converted it into a Todd A.O. movie theater, which was a competing format to Cinerama.
And they didn't spend any real money to demolish anything when they did the renovation because that would have cost more money than they had to spend.
So rather than destroying that much, they really just covered everything up. So in terms of the interior decoration, most everything that you go into and see in the building right now is the original plasterwork that Eberson created. It was just a matter of pulling everything off and revealing that.
And then the Astro closed in 1980. The date I have here is June 15th, 1980. Mrs. B saved the theater and held on to the theater, and we all have her to thank.
The legend, as Mrs. B tells it herself, is that as a young immigrant mother sometime in the mid-1930s, she was in the then Paramount Theater, as she went to it quite often, being right next to her downtown business.
In order to raise money, there was an amateur contest. And I went to the theater, and I was probably, well, I looked like I was 5 years old, because I've always been small. And what I did was I sang Am I Blue in the amateur contest. I won the amateur contest, a $5 gold piece. But in 1981, when there was a very serious threat of the building being torn down totally, my mother, Rose Blumkin, Mrs. B, stepped in, looked at the theater and says, I'm not going to let them tear that theater down. And she said to me, you go buy it. Creighton owned it. You tell them I want to buy the theater. And so she did.
Early on, in 1985, it became clear that our current facility at 35th and Center was already, didn't meet our current needs, and that as our programs were beginning to grow, that need was going to intensify. So we went on a whole sort of long journey to try to get to a new space.
It was more than a theater. It was an experience, and again, it was a place of dreams. And so many people have an affection. It isn't like a cold, hard building. They have an affection for the theater. And a theater is only good if it is being used. And then one of the reasons my mother was so happy that it was going to be a theater for young people, because Omaha's been very good to her. And she's always saying, God bless America. So it was her great pleasure, and you know, our whole family, to finally see that the theater was going to be used. There was going to be action, lights, cameras.
The family and Mrs. B decided, let's go for it. This is a great project. These people have clearly lined up a lot of community support. If this is what it's going to take to get it done, we'll do that. So it really was a tremendous gift, which is why it's now going to be named the Rose Blumkin Performing Arts Center, because it was really Mrs. B who, just by her sheer love of that building, hung on to the building, saved it, nurtured it, took care of it, and then finally made the contribution that really allowed us to get going on the whole capital fundraising campaign.
It's been the easiest sell in the world. You can sell this, you can sell the Children's Theater, you can sell downtown Omaha, you can sell the building all by itself for people's sentimental reasons, historic preservation, just a really cool thing.
The thing that is probably the most significant in terms of its impact on our organization is that this building and its status as a landmark and just the sheer beauty of it as a work of architectural art lends a status and a prestige to our work and organization that will significantly increase not only our status within the community, but also it will be the coolest children's theater in the United States. And that gives us a lot of exciting options in terms of national funding sources for attracting national talent to come and work in the facility. And it's that institutional advancement that the new facility gives us that really probably, in terms of meeting our needs, is the most important thing about being in that particular building.
We came down here one night, I think in February. It was so cold in here. Through the concrete, it was just like being in a freezer. And these walls were draped with huge, from all the way up at the ceiling to the floor, gold sort of curtains from the remains of apparently when it was a movie theater in the 60s or 70s. And we sort of pulled those back and sort of yanked them back and shone the flashlight up onto these walls. And we had an idea that there was something going on, obviously, behind this stuff, but we just all stood there dumbfounded with the sort of complexity of the decoration and also the boldness of the colors, because even though they were dirty, you could still see that there was a tremendous amount of painted decoration going on. But interestingly, at that time even, the whole place has this sort of really positive feeling about it.
You'd walk through this building, and especially after we'd taken the draperies off of the side walls of the main house, and you could see all of this incredible sculpture work and plaster work and things, all faded and dingy kind of, but it was all there. And you'd walk through and you'd see like the old boards where they would mark down the different sets and the different people who were to come on at a given time during a show, and just a real romantic kind of character to the building, just daydreaming about what all went on and if those walls could speak, the tales they could tell. When that building was vacant, I talked about it as a missing tooth. It really was a key intersection. It was somewhat surrounded by institutions that had some longevity, and yet it being a vacant building really detracted from that part of the neighborhood. So having someone occupy that location was very important. It's much more than losing a building. It's losing part of our community's history. It's our past. So I think the community benefits on many, many levels by the restoration of this building and other significant buildings in the city. But this one in particular, I think, is a real gem, a real piece of fantasy.
Before we ever got started, we had a pre-construction meeting, and on a normal job, you have a little bit more time. You have areas where guys can be working in by themselves. This job, we started out telling them at the pre-construction meeting, hey, this job, there's going to be electricians working right side by side with sheetrockers. I mean, we're going to have everybody in one room. And I said, there shouldn't be any complaining because we know from the start that's the way it's going to be. Everybody has worked fantastic. I mean, we couldn't have asked for any better subcontractors on this job. The total reason why this job has been such a good one is because of the companies that we've had involved in this project.
It definitely had its challenges. The building was interesting in that there was so much to start with. There was the functions For the main house of the theater, fortunately, we're going to remain roughly similar to what it had been designed to do when it was a vaudeville house.
Now, this building was a little bit unique, well, a lot unique in that it wasn't a clear-cut process. We didn't sit down and complete the entire drawing package, knowing that all the T's were crossed and all the I's were dotted.
But probably the biggest challenge was trying to accommodate the other functions of the company, which meant education space, administrative office space, places for rehearsals. Those things had never been designed into this building, and so that was a challenge. It's really fun to see a lot of these trades that, you know, several years ago were disappearing. You know, the people who could work the plaster the way the old guys did it, you know, and you know, just seeing a lot of these older technicians training these younger guys to do this work is, you know, it really is exciting, because for us in the design industry, we now have these tradesmen, the new generation of these folks, after working on these kinds of projects, that can hopefully take these kinds of construction techniques into the future.
You know, I'm not a believer in sort of odd spiritual things, but there is something really good about being here and working, and the excitement that it's sort of stirring up in Omaha, and I think all the other guys that are working here are having the same kind of experience. Everybody's really working hard and having a good time, and you know, every time anybody asks for anything extra, everybody sort of, you know, puts in the extra effort to do it, and you know, also we're working on top of each other because we're moving so fast. There, you know, the electricians are kind of working, and I'm working under them or on top of them, and the plasterers are patching a corner at the same time that the carpenters are trying to finish some molding someplace, and you know, it's kind of crazy. So we end up sort of working on top and redoing a few things, but nevertheless, everybody's sort of into it and kind of as a team thing. It's great. It's a really, really interesting project.
We've been very lucky in terms of, many people walk into the building and say, you know, wow, where did you ever find the craftsmen to be able to recreate this? And the reality of it is, they're around us. And in fact, we used local vendors for all of that major work.
The glory of this place is the decoration of it. So the wonder to me is that nobody had focused on the repainting of it. So sort of to bring me in to be on site making these choices and actually doing a fair amount of the painting myself is really great fun.
It was pretty fulfilling to be able to do this, you know, do the sculpting and the mold work, and to be able to figure out how to fit it all together to make it look seamless the way it does. I mean, no one will ever know that it was all wrecked out of there. You'd have to show them pictures before, and then a lot of people won't even believe it because it looks original now.
Ultimately, we're trying to give it the character that it might have had, but with an attitude to try to make it seem a little more, I don't know, tasteful, I guess. You know, although it's just completely crazy and over the top.
I love going down there and just watching the construction people. And with them, it isn't just like you go and you're building something, which I think is probably always a thrill. But they're not only building, they've got their hearts in it, they've got their minds in it, and they want it to be beautiful, and it is beautiful.
While it's anything that looks this good and feels this good in downtown Omaha is a great thing, but I can't overestimate the power of this place when it opens to the people that the Children's Theater plays to. I think the most important thing about this place is this is a magic space. It's going to translate, everybody that walks in here is going to leave feeling different than they did walking in.
Welcome. Welcome to the Rose. How are you tonight?
Just gorgeous.
It pulls everybody in because it covers the whole city. The kids of every background enjoy this, and they have to be inspired by this theater.
It's another addition to what has become the arts and entertainment role, in my opinion, corridor stretching from the Jocelyn on the north down to the Children's Museum on the south, and you have the theater here in the middle. I just think it's wonderful.
I think the preservation aspects of what's happening here is absolutely the right way to go. I think we've got to think about preserving our heritage through our architecture and not be so hung up on just building everything new every time.
What do you take us for? Ignorant animals?
For one thing, it means a huge amount for the kids. This provides a larger facility, which a lot of people don't realize that the theater does programming 344 days a year. It's not just the main stage performances. There's a huge amount of educational work that goes on. It allows us to have a lot more space. We have a lot of new classrooms. We're better located for kids coming from North and South Omaha.
Our historic buildings, they anchor us to our past, you know, and to have that same grandparent take a child to watch a play in that theater where the grandparent is reliving these great memories, and this child has these brand new memories that he'll pass on to generations to come. There's a sort of a connection there that, except for this historic environment, you know, being there, it's lost.
It brings life to downtown, and for a downtown that I think for many years was fading, this is another step on the road to recovery for downtown.
This is a fairyland for anybody that hasn't seen it. I don't care whether they're little kids or whether they're 35-year-old adults. If they've never seen a theater like this, it's a real experience in itself, and it couldn't be more appropriate for a children's theater.
It was such a glamorous building. You know, it's such an unusual building. Even if you had to go upstairs, you felt kind of elegant in the Paramount. It was just a marvelous building. I still think that it is an interesting piece of architecture. And I am so pleased that they have it opened again. I am also pleased that my children, grandchildren, may go and participate.
There's sort of an unreality about it for me. I mean, having for so many years told so many people how cool it is, to actually see it and go like, oh, that is cool. I just thought it was something I made up, you know? And now it's really there, and it's actually even more spectacular than I could have dreamed that it would be.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Mary! Oh, Mary! Oh, let me feel it. Oh, you're real! Oh, Mary, you have no idea what happened to me.
No idea what's happened. Here. Here. Stand here. Don't move.
Okay. The police. It's all right.
Oh, it's a miracle.
I don't care.